Hello everyone, welcome to Jumbo IS. So we are covering today day 3 of environment current affairs through MCQs. I hope day 1 and day 2 MCQs are clear to you guys, and if you still have any issue or any doubt, you can talk to us, you can message us as well. Okay, so let's start with the day 3 MCQs. First of all, we'll discuss question number 1. With reference to globally important agricultural heritage systems, consider the following system statements. Basically, this topic was in news because recently 6 new GIAS sites were added. Okay, so it is very important. So first of all, what are these sites? These sites are basically those sites which are practicing agriculture with traditional knowledge, and so that environment is not getting harmed as well. So it is by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, that it recognizes any site which is doing agriculture with preserving traditional knowledge and benefiting environment as well. So those are called globally important agricultural heritage systems. So first of all, GIAHS recognition is based solely on agricultural productivity and export potential. No, it is not solely based upon productivity and export potential. It is about recognizing the traditional knowledge of a community. Okay, so it is important. So solely what is wrong written here? So the statement is wrong. These systems are characterized by dynamic interaction between community practices and ecological processes, that there is no compromise by environment or community for each other. Okay, so this statement is also right. The program was launched as part of Sustainable Development Discourse in the early 2000s. In 2002, World Sustainable Summit was there, and in that summit, these sites were recognized. Okay, so yes, GIHS sites aim to preserve biodiversity along cultural identity. Yes, the culture, biodiversity, environment are basically coexisting with each other. Okay, so yes, this statement is also right. Which of the statement given above is correct? So 2, 3, and 4 are the correct statements. So answer will be your A, 2, 3, and 4. So for example, if we take example of India, is there any site of GIHS in India? Then answer is yes. India has 3 sites. One, we have saffron cultivation in Kashmir. Then we have Koraput agriculture system in Odisha, where we use traditional agriculture, traditional knowledge to grow rice, paddy, and etc. And then we have Kotanad, below sea level farming, where rice and fish farming is coexisting with each other. So these 3 sites are basically present in India, which are recognized as GIHS by FAO. Okay, so it is important. So answer will be your A, 2, 3, and 4. So this is also given your whole explanation as well. Next, we have considered the following regarding Aditi scheme. So it's Aditi is not Aditi, it has some full form. Okay, so first of all, this scheme addresses industrial decarbonization by improving energy efficiency in MSMEs. Micro, small, and medium enterprises are those enterprises which are responsible for having a large employment potential. And if these number of if the number of industries is very high, then they don't have much amount of technology that they can use for decarbonization. So what we want, that we want MSMEs to grow, we want number of MSMEs to grow, but it should not harm our environment as well. It should not be responsible for global warming and climate change as well. So we want that energy efficiency should be for MSMEs. So we have launched Aditi scheme, in which we will give them loans with very less interest, so that they can adopt new technologies and they don't have to worry about the finances as well. So we want that 3 to 30 to 50% energy efficiency should be achieved by those MSMEs. So the statement is right. It provides financial support in the form of interest subvention differentiated by enterprise size. Yes, if we talk about micro and small medium, we will provide them 5% interest subsidy. And if we talk about medium enterprises, we give them 3% interest subsidy. So yes, on the basis of enterprise sizes, the difference in the interest subsidy also lies. Okay, so the statement is also right. It is implemented under the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. Whenever we talk about energy efficiency, we always have in mind that MNRE will be responsible. But no, if we talk about energy efficiency, we also have Ministry of Power in our mind. And with the Ministry of Power, BEE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, body is responsible for the implementation of this Aditi scheme. Next, we have the statement is wrong. Next, investment grade energy audit is part of It's streamlined implementation. Okay, so yes, energy audit will be there, that if any industry has done well in this manner, so we will celebrate that, we'll give awards to them. So yes, for streamlined implementation and investment grade energy audit will be there to have the overall performance review of a micro, small, or medium enterprise. So this statement is also right. So which is correct? So first is correct, second is correct, third was incorrect. So answer will be your 1, 2, and 4 only. So we have given almost 4 statements in every question. So you just have to revise each and every fact behind these statements. You don't have to worry about that every answer has 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 4, 2, 3, and 4. So it's not the objective of these questions. Objective is this: if this statement is wrong, yes, it is wrong or it is right, what are the reasons behind its being wrong and right? Okay, so the factual information should be memorized day by day, line by line, so that we have not we are not forgetting all the facts, and we have a memory in our mind that we can memorize these facts for longer period of time. Okay, so the basic objective of these MCQs is this. Okay, so the answer will be A, 1, 2, and 4. Next, we will talk about with reference to national policy on geothermal energy. Geothermal energy is basically the heat energy by earth, and the earth heat is basically magma. So we have the potential to capture the earth's heat in producing the electricity. So that electricity will be known as geothermal energy. So we have come up with the national policy that we want to have 10 gigawatt of geothermal energy production in recent years. So how we can achieve that? That's basically based on this policy. So number one statement, the policy attempts to mitigate high exploration risks through tenure clarity and fiscal support. Yes, there is high exploration risk that if we want to have the exploration in this area is already tectonically active. So there can be earthquakes, there can be volcanism. So these areas are very, very, very high exploration risk. So government is doing what it is giving the leases like exploration rights or development rights. So exploration rights will be for 3 years with 2 extension. Developmental rights will be for longer period of time for 30 years. So we give them tenure clarity and fiscal support, that yes, we also want that you should have more loans at a very less interest rate. Okay, so that geothermal energy can be produced in an effective manner. So yes, the statement is right. Extraction of lithium and silica from geothermal fluids is permitted subject to mineral regulations. Yes, silica and lithium comes under MMDR Act, Mines and Mineral Development Regulation Act. So yes, whenever we are producing geothermal energy, if silica and lithium is produced in that process, so it can be extracted, but again, the permission will be again according to MMDR Act. So yes, this statement is also right. Development leases are short-term exploratory permits limited to 5 years. No, 5 years is for explorational rights. Development rights is for longer period of time for 30 years. Okay, so that this area can develop more in terms of geothermal province. Okay, so this statement is wrong. The policy promotes hybrid renewable systems involving geothermal power. What is the meaning of hybrid of geothermal and renewable sources like solar? Like we have one grid, and in this grid, from the solar energy, the energy is being transferred, and from geothermal as well, the energy is being transferred to this grid. So one grid is having energy from those two resources which are renewable in nature. So that's called hybrid. Okay, so yes, hybrid is also being encouraged in this policy. So first, second, and fourth statement is right. Then answer will be your A, 1, 2, and 4 only. In this policy, there is the identification of 10 geothermal provinces in India, and around 381 geothermal hotspots are identified. For example, if we talk about geothermal provinces like Puga Valley in Ladakh, Ladakh is the geothermal province, and we have Sonata Belt, Son, Narmada, Tapi area. So that's very important. So there are total 10 geothermal provinces. So the question can also be formed in a manner that these are the provinces out of these following or these above provinces, which is the part of geothermal province according to this national policy on geothermal energy? So the question can be asked in that manner also. So you have to remember those 10 provinces as well. That's given in your notes. Okay, so that's important. So answer will be your A, 1, 2, and 4 only. And next we have with reference to e-methanol. Methanol is CH3OH. Consider the following statement. It is also used as fuel, just like ethanol. Okay, so ethanol is responsible for blending with petrol and petrol, but methanol is not yet used for blending in petrol and diesels. Okay, so e-methanol is basically what? When the methanol is produced through green resources. For example, we talk about e-methanol, then methanol is CH3OH, which is formed by the reaction between your H2 and your CO2. So with the reaction between hydrogen and carbon dioxide, it promotes methanol. So whenever we have hydrogen from green resources, like by the electrolysis process, hydrogen is being produced, and for electrolysis process we have used solar or other renewable sources of energy. So that is basically your green hydrogen, and CO2 is being captured from different industries. So it is being captured from different industries, so emission is basically reduced there, and hydrogen is also produced without any emission. So whenever ethanol will be produced by this method, then it will be called e-methanol. Okay, so number one, it converts renewable electricity into chemical energy stored in liquid form. Yes, methanol will be stored in liquid form, and which can be used as fuel as well. So it was in news because the world's first e-methanol plant was established in Denmark recently. So that's why we have made MCQ on this topic. So second, its carbon intensity depends on the source of hydrogen and captured CO2. Yes, carbon intensity is basically what? It is the production of 1 rupee or one currency basically, and to produce that much amount of rupee, how much emission has been done? How much carbon emission has been done? That's carbon intensity. So yes, this statement is also right. It directly replaces diesel in conventional engines without modification. Every engine will need not modification. Even if you are blending ethanol or methanol with petrol, it also need modification. So the conventional engines are basically responsible for only 7 to 8% ethanol blending with petrol. They are just okay with that only. But Indian government has done what? It has come up with E10%, E10, or we have ethanol 20% blending with petrol. So those engines are not built for that blending of ethanol with petrol. So again, people are protesting for that, but again, it requires modification. So statement number third is wrong. So fourth, it contributes to a circular carbon economy. Yes, we want to capture CO2, and whenever we are using e-methanol in vehicles, then there will be no emission. So carbon is not emitted even in industries and even in vehicles. So that, yes, it is the part of circular carbon economy. So which of the following above is correct? So we have 1, 2, and 4 is the correct option. So answer will be your A. Okay. So why it is A, why is not all four? So the reason should be clear to you. Next, we have with reference to Green Hydrogen Certification Scheme of India. It is basically under Green Hydrogen Mission of India. So consider the following statements. Certification is based on emission intensity averaged annually. Basically, what is happening that if you are producing 1 kilogram of hydrogen, then how much amount of CO2 is being produced? Like you have produced 2 kilogram of CO2 and its equivalent, then it is basically permissible. Okay, so if you are producing only 1 kilogram of hydrogen and 200 kilogram of CO2 is basically being produced, then it is not a very feasible project. Okay, so yes, certification is based on emission intensity averaged annually. We are talking about annually. Okay, so the second is emission from transport outside plant boundary and are counted in the certification threshold. If you are producing hydrogen in a green manner, like you are using a solar power for electrolysis process, okay, so the transportation if you are using trucks for transportation, which is again responsible for emission of carbon and other particulate matters, and your and anything outside the plant boundaries also included in this certification, then answer is no. We are not talking about the transportation, we are not talking about storage, we are just talking about the formation of this green hydrogen. And if you are producing this green hydrogen with a very less amount of CO2 emission, then our objective is achieved. Okay, so yes, it is not counted, so this statement becomes wrong. Then third is certification can be traded in carbon markets. It is still not tradable. Okay, so we have not made that tradable, that if a company has less amount of CO2 emitted from the production of H2 or hydrogen gas, then it can trade with any other company which has not achieved its target. So it is not still there. And just like Kyoto Protocol, which have CO2 as tradable commodity, so this certification is not tradable for now. Okay, so the statement is also wrong. The scheme aims to ensure credibility in international markets. Okay, so because whenever any company has this certification, then it is clearing the credibility that yes, we have the certificate and we have produced this electricity or this hydrogen in a very less carbon intensive processes. Okay, so yes, it aims to ensure credibility in international trade. So answer is your 1 and 4 only, because second and third statement are your wrong. So answer will be your A, 1 and 4. Okay, next we'll discuss with reference to National Green Hydrogen Mission. The National Green Hydrogen Mission says what? By 2030, we have to produce at least 5 million metric ton annually by 2030. So this is our target. So our target is also 125 gigawatt of electricity should be produced with the help of green hydrogen, and we have to capture the carbon, we have to reduce the carbon emissions by using more green hydrogen in vehicles as well. Okay, so consider the following statements. Number one, it links renewable capacity expansion with hydrogen production target. Yes, it is basically hydrogen is being produced, the targets are there, and yes, renewable capacity expansion is there with the targets. Whenever you achieve some amount of target, then again it will be given more to you, that yes, you have to expand this renewable energy capacity. Okay, so this is the green hydrogen mission. It focuses on hard to abate sectors such as steel and shipping. These are very much responsible for carbon emission. Basically, they used much amount of fuel. So, and steel making is basically responsible for coal and carbon emissions, because steel is formed by iron with coal with limestone. When they are basically present in blast furnace, it is basically being heated up, and by that pig iron or the molten iron is established, is basically produced. And in this pig iron or molten iron, you use nickel, molybdenum, zirconium, titanium, and then you make the amount of steel. So yes, these areas are very much responsible for carbon emission. So yes, this these sectors are basically focused under this National Green Hydrogen Mission. It mandates compulsorily green hydrogen blending in refinery nationwide. Yes, this is a target, but it has not been officially announced, because it is not compulsorily that green hydrogen is to be blended with refineries. So it is a very complex process. So it is not officially announced yet. So the statement becomes wrong. It aims to reduce cost of green hydrogen through scale and incentives. Then answer is yes, we want to reduce the cost of green hydrogen, because whenever we use electrolysis process, we use solar energy, and solar energy is also very expensive in nature. So we have to cut the cost for production of green hydrogen through scale and incentives. So government can give the incentives, or we can reduce the amount of technology basically that we bought from other countries, or we can have our technology on our own. So whatever can be done, but yes, we have to reduce the cost. So the answer will be your 1, 2 and 4 only, because third statement is wrong, because there is no blending of green hydrogen in refineries yet. Okay, so it is important. Next we have With reference to flue gas desulfurization, consider the following statements. It is basically used in coal thermal power plants, because whenever we are using coal power plants and producing electricity, then SO2 emissions are there. So SO2 has this, basically this flue gas. Flue gas has more amount of SO2 and PM 2.5 and PM 10. So we have to desulfurize the process, because SO2 is your, again, pollutant plus greenhouse gas. So we have to desulfurize the process. So number one, it reduces sulfur dioxide emission from the coal combustion. Yes, it reduces, because whenever there is industry, there is this flue gas desulfurization, and whenever this exhaust is going from this chimney, it will absorb the SO2 gas, and there will be less SO2 in your atmosphere. So less greenhouse gas, less global warming, less climate change responsible. Okay, so yes, it is responsible for reduction of SO2 emission from coal combustion. SO2 emissions contribute to secondary particulate matter formation. Yes, PM 2.5, PM 10 are basically formed by this SO2 emissions. Yes, under revised norms, most thermal power plants remain obligated to install FGD. So it was earlier. Now the revised guidelines are there, in which power plants are categorized into three categories: Category A, Category B, and Category C. Category A has those power plants which are present in NCR region and within 10 kilometer of NCR region. And because NCR is full of pollution of air, and that is why all thermal power plants has to have FGD by 2027. Okay, so B is basically, category B is for those power plants, those thermal power plants which are present in the high risk zones. Okay, so they also have to install FGD. So only category A has in India 11% of thermal power plants. Same B, 11% of thermal power plants. Category C, which is basically exempted from installing the FGD, it is basically present in 78% of amount. So it is not like that every power plant is obligated to have FGD. So the most thermal power plants are not obligated to install FGD, because 78% are exempted from this notification. So category A by 2027, then category B 2028, but category C is exempted. So yes, this statement is wrong. Under revised norms, it is vice versa. It is reciprocal. Next, stack height can act as a dispersion based compliance mechanism. So also the stack height is also responsible, and if it is under permissible limit, then it can also have its basically compliance, and mechanism is basically being fulfilled. So yes, this statement is also right. Even if you don't know the answer of four option, or first or second you don't know, so even you know answer option 3, then also your first B and fourth option is eliminated. So 2 and 4 are basically correct. Means 4 is automatically correct. 2 is also correct. So 1 is also, it is two common statement that desulfurization means what? That reduction in SO2 emission. It is not a rocket science that what is the meaning of desulfurization. It is again reduction of the SO2 emission from coal power plants. So your answer will be your A, 1, 2 and 4 only. It is important. Next, we have, with reference to geothermal provinces of India, consider the following statements. We have 10 geothermal provinces in India according to our national policy on geothermal energy. First of all, Puga Valley lies in Himalayan geothermal province. Yes, Puga Valley is in Ladakh and it is in the Himalayan region. Tattapani is the part of Sonata belt. Sonata is your Son, Narmada, Tapi belt. Tattapani is in Madhya Pradesh. So yes, it is the part of that. Kembe Graben has potential for industrial geothermal applications. Yes, the Gulf of Khambat is also responsible for its geothermal applications. All geothermal provinces are confined to tectonically active regions only. So it is not true as such that because every tectonically active region has some geothermal potential. Answer is yes, but it is not for sure that only these will be responsible for geothermal production. Every region which is not tectonically active for so long, then it can also be used as geothermal production. So the statement number 4 is your incorrect. So answer is your 1, 2 and 3. Option A is your answer. Next we have, with reference to e-methanol and green hydrogen, consider the following statements. Number 1, green hydrogen is produced using electrolysis powered by renewable energy. Then answer is yes, because if we use solar, wind, or any other renewable resource of energy for production of green hydrogen by electrolysis process. So yes, it is true statement. Carbon capture in e-methanol production reduces industrial emission at source. Yes, whenever we are producing e-methanol, then we have to capture the carbon from one industry. So yes, it is reducing the carbon from industries at source. So this statement is also right. Direct electrification is generally more energy efficient than multi-step fuel synthesis. Okay, we'll see that. So 1 and 2 are correct. So your option C and option B is your eliminated. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. So third statement is always right. So according to options, we have taken this inference that yes, direct electrification is generally more energy efficient. Then answer is no. It requires more amount of energy. Multi-step fuel synthesis is more energy efficient than direct electrification because it uses less amount of energy. It is responsible for capturing of carbon at once, and so on. So yes, this statement is wrong. E-methanol production eliminates safety concern associated with flammable fuels. Okay, so statement number third and fourth we'll see again. So e-methanol production eliminates safety concern associated with flammable fuels. Again, if e-methanol is again produced, it is again toxic, it is flammable. So there is no like it is eliminating safety concerns. It is still there. It is flammable in nature. So this statement is wrong. Okay, so fourth statement is always wrong. Okay, so statement number third, if we take the options, then direct electrification is generally more energy efficient than multi-step fuel synthesis because in multi-step, again, yes, carbon is being captured, but it is not talking about energy efficiency. It is talking about a reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions. So multi-step will require more amount of energy, more amount of electricity. If we are using direct electrification, then it will require less amount of energy. Okay, so your answer will be 1, 2, and 3 are correct, but 4 statement is totally wrong because it is not eliminating your safety concerns because it is again flammable and toxic as e-methanol. Okay, so your answer will be A, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so it is important. Next, we have which of the following best explain why GIAHS systems are relevant in the context of climate change. So, number one, they maximize chemical fertilizers used for higher yields. It is not directly linked with the climate change. Second, they conserve biodiversity and promote resilient agro ecosystems. Okay, yes, they promote biodiversity, they promote different number of trees which are responsible for carbon sink. So yes, climate change will be at lesser rate. So yes, and promote resilient agro ecosystems because whenever climate change is there, there can be no growth of crop like rice and wheat because they require a particular kind of climate. So if we have agroclimatic systems which are climate resilient, then yes, it reduces the impact of climate change on an agriculture. Okay, so this statement is considered to be right. So if we take statement number third, they replace traditional farming with industrial agriculture. It is opposite because it is replacing industrial agriculture with traditional farming. They discourage community based resource management. No, they encourage community based resource management. Okay, so your answer is your option B. Next, we have with reference to hazardous and other waste management and transboundary movement amendment rules, consider the following statements. Recently, the government has come up with some amendments in this rule. So, number one, the amendment marks a shift from end of pipe disposal to a life cycle based circular economy approach. So, the amendment says what that we are not just focusing on the waste disposal, we are focusing over less waste generated, and we are also focusing over recycling of that waste. Okay, so it is marking a shift from end of pipe disposal, that it is not just waste disposal, it is about waste generation as well. So this statement is right. Producer of aluminium, copper, zinc products are now responsible for meeting recycling targets through EPR. EPR is basically your extended producer responsibility, that whether producer or your brand owner or investor, anything, anybody who is responsible for creation or generation of any plastic or any hazardous waste, then it is the responsibility of them only that they have to recycle that. So it is extended producer responsibility. It is the responsibility of producer to recycle that waste. So yes, this statement is also right. It is also for aluminium, zinc, and copper producer as well. Next, we have import of hazardous waste for final disposal continues to be permitted under strict monitoring. Okay, so 1 and 2 are correct. Fourth is EPR certificates under the new framework can be traded in a market mechanism but remain time bound. Yes, the green hydrogen certification was not tradable in the market, but if we talk about hazardous waste certificates, then it is tradable in market mechanisms. Okay, so statement number 1, 2, and 4 are correct. So option statement number third is wrong because import of hazardous waste for final disposal, it is already prohibited under 2016 framework, and now only recycling, recovery, and reuse is permitted. So it is not by the amendment that import is prohibited. It was earlier prohibited. So that is why statement number third is your incorrect. Next, we have under the revised hazardous waste framework, which of the following developments reflects greater regulatory flexibility without weakening environmental safeguards? Because we want that we don't want a weakening of environment safeguards, but we also don't want that there is a very fixed approach, rigid approach, that no industry can have that waste, and no industry can generate that much amount of waste even if they are responsible for its disposal in a sustainable manner. So we want some balance between these two. So number 1, extending storage limits for small waste generators to improve transport viability. Yes, small generators are basically those which produce less than 5 ton of hazardous wastes. Okay, so yes, we want to extend the storage limit, that it is complying with the environmental safeguard under these amendments. Mandatory recycling content requirement for new metal products, yes, it is mandatory in nature. So number third, removal of authorization requirement from SPCBs for hazardous waste handlers. Okay, integration of end of life vehicles rules with hazardous waste management. Okay, so if we want to remove the authorization requirement from SPCBs, then it is not basically strengthening the environmental safeguard because of these waste. It is weakening again. So we want without weakening of environmental safeguards, and we want greater regulatory flexibility, that industries are there, they are working on their own, and there is no interference by SPCBs and CPCB. But we should also work for strengthening of environmental safeguard. So we have to take permissions, and regulation should be under these SPCBs. So if we remove the authorization requirement from SPCB, it will weaken that. So that's why your statement number third is wrong, and 1, 2, and 4 are correct statements. So option A will be your answer. Next, we have the pollution index used for industrial classification in India is significant because pollution index is basically that revised guidelines are there, that industries will be according to the pollution index. Like if any industry is producing less than 25, if the number is less than 25 pollution index, then it is called white industry. If 25 to 55, uh, then it is your orange green industry. If 55 to 80, then it is your orange industry, and then 80 above is your red industry. Basically it is increasing level of pollution. Okay, so red industries, the categories of the red category in which industrial sectors are there, they are responsible for more amount of pollution. It can be water, it can be air, it can be any other pollution as well. Okay, so yes, it applies equal weightage to air, water, and hazardous waste pollution. Yes, almost equal weightage is given to three of these waste managements and pollutions. It classifies individual factories rather than industrial sectors. No, individual factories are not there, sectors are there. That this is the sector of green hydrogen production. Then there will be two companies in this category. So it is about industrial sectors, not individual factories. So the statement is wrong. It promotes quantitative basis for consent validity duration. Yes, it is for 12-year, 13-year, 10-year, 20 years. Again, consent validity duration will be there according to their pollution index. It enables uniform implementation through centralized digital monitoring. Yes, the statement is also right. It is uniform implementation and it will be centralized monitoring. That central government will be responsible for supervision and monitoring. So statement number one is correct. Then we have second statement is wrong because it is for industrial sectors, not individual factories. So 1, 3, and 4 will be your answer. So answer is option A. Okay, so it is very important that red year is for 5 years consent validity duration, that even then after 5 years you have to again take the permission from the government. For orange it is 10, for green it is 15, and for white it is there is no requirement of permission. White industries are those which are not creating any kind of pollution. Okay, so a new category blue is also being classified in this. So blue categories was those category because whenever we talk about that sewage to treatment plants, like whenever waste is being treated, and that kind of sector, that kind of industry is responsible for decreasing the pollution. So those industries which are working in this sector, those are called blue category industries. Okay, so it is very important. So next we have the introduction of blue category. Again, the question is on the blue category. Industrial classification primarily reflects which of the following policy objectives? Number one, encouraging high emission industries to self-regulate. No, there is no self-regulation. It is only for white industries, self-regulation. Recognizing pollution control and waste processing sectors as environmental service providers. Okay, yes, pollution is being controlled, it is being recognized, and waste processing sectors as environmental service providers, that yes, these waste processing sectors are also responsible for decrease in the pollution level if in any environment. Okay, so this statement is seeing positive, and that could be the answer. So replacing the red category for thermal power plants, then answer is no, it is not replacement of red category for TPPs. Deregulating hazardous industries, no, there will be no deregulation, there will be more regulation of these hazardous industries. So your option B will be your answer, because blue category distinguishes industries that reduce pollution, like WTE plants, waste to energy plants, sewage treatment plants, and biomining. Okay, so it does not deregulate hazardous industries or eliminate red category. So option B is your answer. Next, we have Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan differs from conventional air quality ranking because it is basically to have the rank of different cities that they have done very great in cleanliness. Okay, so that's your called Swachh Vayu Sarvekshan, that your air quality is very much improved. So number one, it evaluates city level interventions rather than only ambient pollutant concentrations. So we want ambient city level concentrations interventions. Basically what we want, that PM 2.5 is less, PM 10 is less, there is cleanliness on the roads, infrastructure is there to tackle the air pollution, so everything will be included. So there is just not ambient pollutant concentration, that only PM 2.5, PM 10, SO2, and only these will be measured, and then there will be ranking of different cities. So it is not like that. It uses Prana portal for self-reporting followed by third-party verification. Yes, every city will fill all the details by themselves, and it will be verified by third party as well. So the statement is right. It excludes PM 2.5 and PM 10 improvement from evaluation. Okay, so PM 2.5 and PM 10 will be included in the evaluation process. So this statement is wrong. Okay, it operates under National Clean Air Program, NCAP. Yes, this NCAP is basically whenever there is non-attainment cities, those cities which are not adhering the principles under NAAQS, National Ambient Air Quality Standards, in which 12 pollutants are there, like PM 2.5, PM 10, SO2, NO2, we have ammonia, we have lead, we have ozone, we have carbon monoxide, we have arsenic, we have benzene, benzopyrene, and nickel. So all these 12 pollutants are responsible for measurement. Okay, so those cities which which are not adhering these standards by CPCB, then these cities are called non-attainment cities by Niti Aayog, and for these cities there will be the formulation of National Clean Air Program, which basically focuses over that reduction of PM 2.5 and PM 10 should be there about 30 to 40% by 2026. So the target is there. So just look at the target for once, because I'm not sure that it is 30 to 40% or it is 40%. I think it is 40% reduction by 2026. But again, you just have to check once. Okay, what is the target for NCAP? Okay, so answer will be your 1, 2, and 4, because statement number third is wrong, because PM 2.5 and PM 10 is under your evaluation. Next, we have which of the following best explains why CAQM replaces EPCA. CAQM is Commission for Air Quality Management for especially NCR region. And then we have EPCA, Environmental Protection Control Authority, Environmental Pollution Control Authority, which was Supreme Court mandated in 1997, because there was more amount of pollution in Delhi area at that time. So Supreme Court intervened, and it establishes this EPCA, that only for NCR region you have to be the authority, you have to take some decisions for curbing the pollution level of air in that area. Okay, so EPCA came up with GRAP, Graded Response Action Plan, in 2017, because the level of pollution was rising at a very alarming rate. So, Graded Response Action Plan is basically whenever the pollution level is this, then these initiatives will be taken. If the pollution level rises, then these initiatives will be taken. So, it is the Graded Response Action Plan. Okay, so yes, EPCA was responsible for the implementation of GRAP, but as this was SC mandated and there was no statutory backing for this body, so that's why in 2018 and 2019, CAQM was established by the government of India, and it made a statutory body. And it has some statutory backing as well. It has more powers as compared to EPCA, and EPCA was replaced by CAQM. Okay, so you just have to check the year. In 2017, notified under 2017. So what is basically the statements? Number one, to provide statutory authority and penal powers, then answer is yes, because it has lack of these powers. To ensure interstate coordination in NCR region, because NCR is UP, Delhi, Haryana, and all other states. So NCR region is basically to have more coordination between these states. To reduce judicial oversight in environmental governance. Okay, so judicial oversight was for EPCA and not for CAQM, because CAQM is a statutory body formed by Parliament, not by Supreme Court. Okay, so to introduce graded emergency response mechanism like GRAP. So GRAP was earlier than CAQM. So it is not a successor of that, it is predecessor of that. So this statement is wrong. So statement number third, 1, 2 are correct. Answer will be your B, 1, 2, and 3 only, because we want to reduce the judicial oversight in the environmental governance. Okay, so statement number, option number B is the answer. Next, we have the global plastic treaty negotiations collapsed primarily due to number one, that Geneva was the location in where the talks were going on, but again Geneva deadlock is there, then there is no global plastic pollution treaty. So number one, disagreement over regulating plastic production versus focusing only on waste management. There are two groups. One group is your high ambition coalition, and second is your like-minded countries. High ambition coalition focuses over that we have to reduce the plastic pollution, we have to reduce the plastic production, and we have to effectively dispose the plastic waste as well. So like-minded countries says what, that plastic is the industry where revenue is too much for these countries, so we have to more focus over the phase out of plastic waste and not to reduce the plastic production. So that is why there was no consensus between these two segments, between these two the group of those countries. Okay, so yes, disagreement was there over regulating plastic production versus focusing only on waste management. Requirement of consensus allowing a few countries to block stronger provision, because this treaty will be finalized whenever there will be consensus, and for consensus every country has to agree, and if even if one country vetoes the decision, then the whole treaty will collapse. So yes, this is the whole agreement. So every country wanting that there should be no consensus, there should be some majority level something. Opposition to listing toxic additives like PFAS at global level. Complete agreement on financial mechanism design. There was no complete agreement on financial mechanism design. Like developing countries need these industries because we don't have any alternative to plastics, and many people are employing in that industries. So we don't want that industries should be shut down and there is less plastic production. So this statement is wrong. So yes, it is opposite to listing toxic additives like PFAS at global level, that it is basically to be managed, to be regulated. It should not be completely prohibited. Okay, so your answer will be 1, 2, and 3. Option A is the answer. Okay, so next we'll have, with reference to Minamata Convention COP6 outcomes, consider the following statements. Minamata Convention is for those countries which are suffering from mercury pollution. So India is also the part of Minamata Convention. Minamata is basically a disease which is which is happened because of the mercury poisoning. If human body or if animal body has mercury in that, then there will be kidney failure and we have neurosensitive issues. So there should be less exposure to mercury for a human body or for any animal body as such. So Minamata Convention is that there should be ban on the mercury mining, and there should be ban on the use of mercury in any compound or in any equipment. So yes, Minamata Convention is that. A global phase out of dental amalgam was agreed by 2034. COP26 was COP6 was there, and yes, the answer was yes, dental amalgam should be phased out. So second statement, artisanal and small scale gold mining remains a major source of mercury emission. We use mercury in gold mining so that pure gold can be retrieved. Okay, so if we use more mercury, then people working in the gold mining can also have the exposure to mercury, and that can also responsible for Minamata disease in them. So yes, we have to yes, this is the major source of mercury emission. Mercury waste classification threshold was first introduced at COP6. It was not first introduced at COP6, it was earlier introduced. India ratified the convention after it entered into force. India ratified the convention. Yes. So which of the following are correct? Then answer will be your A, 1, 2, and 4, because threshold was set earlier in COP5. It was reviewed at COP6 that there should be 15 milligram of mercury per kg. So there is basically threshold that this is the safe limit, but there is no known safe limit for your mercury poisoning. Okay, so a little amount of mercury can also cause you cancer. Okay, so convention entered into 2017, yes, and India ratified in 2018. Yes, India ratified this convention after the convention entered into force. So next is under the 2025 COP meeting of Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions. Basel convention is for to reduce the transboundary movement of hazardous waste. Okay, Rotterdam is for your to reduce the transboundary movement of hazardous chemicals, and Stockholm convention is to reduce the production of POPs, persistent organic pollutants, which are very mobile, which are very toxic, and which are basically biologically mobile, that it can move from one body to another body. Like if we consume fish, then persistent organic pollutants are those which were present in fish body and then ultimately will come into our body, and it will be deposited in the fatty tissues of our human skin, and it is not removed from our body by water or by a kidney. Okay, so they will remain in our body for long period of time. So that's why they are called persistent organic pollutants. So it is basically BRS. So every time we should know that Basel Convention came into force in 1992, Rotterdam and Stockholm came into force in 2004, and India ratified all these three conventions. What is basically COP 2025 meant? Listing of chlor chlorpyrifos for eliminating under Stockholm Convention. So there are multiple number of chemicals listed in these conventions. So you don't have to remember all the chemicals, but the chemicals which were in news, that they were prohibited, they were allowed, they were restricted. So that's only is important for us. So yes, mandatory PIC is prior informed consent procedure for electronic waste trade under Basel amendments. Okay, automatic global ban on your chrysotile asbestos under Rotterdam Convention, strategic roadmap for waste management under Basel 2025-2031. So yes, we should know that first statement was right, that because in Rotterdam Convention, in Stockholm Convention, it was added in the Annex 1. Annex 1 are those are that category in which those chemicals are there which have to be completely prohibited for use, and it should not be export as well. So e-waste, yes, amendments mandate PIC, and your chrysotile asbestos listing was blocked. So that's why this statement was incorrect, that it was not automatically global ban on that chemical. And yes, strategic map was there 2025 and 2031. So for 6 years it was there. So the statement number third was wrong, and 1 to 4 your answer. Next, we have GRAP's stage-wise mechanism reflects which of the following principles of environmental governance? Number one, preventive action based on forecasted pollution level. Yes, it is basically preventive actions, that if pollution level is that much, then these initiatives will be taken. Okay, so and so on. So this statement is right. Proportional regulatory response linked to AQI severity. So the response is proportional, that if this happened, then this will be our response mechanism. Permanent shutdown of polluting sectors irrespective of AQI improvement. Even if any sector or any industry is showing AQI improvement, then it will not be completely shut down, it will given a chance also. So it is not permanent shutdown, so the statement is wrong. An integration of meteorological forecasting into policy activation, that IMD is also responsible for all the forecasting of pollution level and all the systems. And yes, statement number 1, 2, and 4 are correct. Then answer will be your A, 1, 2, and 4 only. Okay, so these are your 20 MCQs for day 3. I hope these MCQs will give you clarity, and if you have any issue or any doubt regarding these 20 MCQs or any notes, then you should talk to us. You can message us, you can call us as well. So you have to just remember that first of all you have to read notes in advance, and because these MCQs are prepared from those notes only, there will be a second time revision. Okay, so first revision will be when you are reading the notes. Second revision whenever you are attempting the MCQs, and third revision whenever you are watching the lectures. And the fourth revision will be there whenever you will again read that notes, that MCQ was there, okay, but why this statement of MCQ was wrong. So you have to again read those notes. So one notes is basically revised 4 times, so it will help you in the longer period of time for longer period of time memorization. Okay, so but still, if you have any issue or any doubt regarding these MCQs, you can talk to us. Thank you so much and all the best.